There's this feeling I think everyone has, but maybe doesn't quite put into words. It's the sense that time is this solid, real thing, something measured and just there. But here's the unsettling part. What if the very thing that makes time feel so real wasn't invented to understand the world, but to control us?
Right, let's really get into this. We all experience time as this constant, universal river, right? It just flows. But what if that feeling is just plain wrong? What if the clock ticking away on your wall or on your phone isn't some window into how the universe works, but a tool, a piece of technology designed for a very, very human purpose?
To really get our heads around this, we have to go way back to a time before any mechanical clocks existed, to a world where time wasn't a bunch of identical little boxes, but something you actually experienced.
For almost all of human history, time was, well, it was fluid. You had natural time. It belonged to the sky. Dawn wasn't 6 a.m., it was just when the sun came up. You started work when the shadows were a certain length. Time stretched and shrank with the seasons, the weather, where you lived. But as societies got bigger and more complex, that created a problem. For things like trade or religion, you need everyone on the same page. You need a shared rhythm.
So people tried to measure it. But what's so interesting about these early gadgets is how they treated time. You had sundials, but they're useless without the sun, water clocks, they'd get all messed up if the temperature changed, and candle clocks, well, they just didn't burn evenly. You see the pattern here? They all treated time like a physical thing that gets used up. Sunlight, water, wax. They were completely at the mercy of nature's whims.
And here's the thing. The goal wasn't really what we'd call accuracy today. It was all about consistency. This was a huge deal in medieval monasteries, for instance, where life was built around these really strict schedules of prayer. If you missed a prayer, it wasn't just you messing up. It threw the whole community out of whack. And you just couldn't trust nature to ring the bell at the exact same time every single day. The rhythm had to come from somewhere else. It had to be enforced.
And that led inventors to this huge central challenge. It actually had nothing to do with building a dial with hands on it. The real problem was a deep question of physics. How do you control motion? How do you regulate it?
Think about it. Any kind of stored energy just wants to release itself all at once, in a big, chaotic rush. The falling weight that powered the first clocks, it just wants to slam into the ground. Water just wants to gush out of a container. Without some way to tame that energy, you don't get a steady tick-tock, you just get a crash. That was the big obstacle.
So, inventors tried everything. They tried using friction, but that was never consistent. They built these incredibly complex systems of gears, but that just made any tiny error even bigger. The real problem, though, was in their heads. They were completely stuck in that old way of thinking, trying to measure something that was already happening out there, like the sun moving or water flowing. The big revolutionary idea, that a machine could generate its own time from the inside, that just hadn't clicked yet.
And this really shows you what those first mechanical clocks were actually for. By our standards, they were terrible timekeepers. They could lose minutes, sometimes even hours in a single day. But they were reliable. They kept a steady rhythm. They were huge, they were public, and they were loud. Their job wasn't to let you, as an individual, know the exact time. Their job was to ring a bell and tell the entire town all at once, "Okay, time to act." The bell was so much more important than the dial.
It really all boiled down to this one simple, powerful idea. These machines had energy, they had motion, but they didn't have a steady internal pulse. The whole system needed a heartbeat.
And now we get to the breakthrough, a huge conceptual leap that wasn't just about building a better machine. It was about to completely redefine time itself by, well, inventing that very heartbeat.
The solution, the invention, was a little device called the escapement, and its function is just pure genius. Instead of letting all that energy rush out at once, the escapement basically catches it and then releases it in these tiny, perfectly controlled, equal little steps. It takes one continuous motion and transforms it into a series of separate, distinct moments. The action of the escapement is pretty radical when you think about it. It takes that chaotic desire of a weight to just fall, and it chops it up into this clean, repeating cycle. Tick, a tiny bit of energy gets released. Pause, the motion is caught. Tick, pause, tick, pause. That sound? That's the sound of power being controlled. That's the sound of the machine's heartbeat.
And this is so much more than just a clever bit of engineering. This is a complete philosophical shift. For the very first time in history, time was no longer something out there in nature that you just watched go by. It was something being actively created, moment by moment, counted into existence by the machine itself.
The clock wasn't just measuring time anymore, it was making it. It was enforcing it.
With the escapement, this new mechanical time was no longer just a passive idea. It could force its own rhythm onto the world, and it didn't care about the sun or the seasons. The abstraction, you could say, had teeth now.
And once that steady artificial rhythm was established, well, the consequences were absolutely enormous. This new kind of time began to systematically rearrange all of human society.
You can see the progression so clearly. The natural, flowing day, which had always been governed by the sun, got fractured. First, it was broken into hours, marked out by the ringing of bells. Then, as the technology got better and better, those hours were themselves fractured into 60 identical, uniform minutes, governed by the precise, relentless turning of gears. What was once a whole was now chopped up into little pieces.
And with that division came this huge shift in authority. Life wasn't organized around daylight anymore. Markets didn't just open when it was light, they opened at a set hour. City dates closed right on schedule. Contracts started to be written in terms of hours. The ultimate authority on what time it was no longer the sky, it was the machine in the town square. And that authority, it didn't just stay in the town square. Let's just trace its journey for a second. First, it was the public clock tower, and it governed the entire community. Then it moved inside, to the factory, where it governed labor and measured how productive people were. And finally, it moved on to our bodies, first as a pocket watch, then a wristwatch. What began as a tool to discipline the community became a tool for us to manage and discipline ourselves.
Which brings us all the way back to that strange, unsettling feeling we started with. But now, with all this history in mind, we can actually start to understand where that feeling comes from.
And here's the bottom line, the core idea. The clock was never invented as a scientific instrument to explore the mysteries of the universe. It was a social tool. It was invented to coordinate people, to discipline human behavior. Its purpose was always about order, not about understanding.
The reason that TikTok feels so fundamental to us, so solid and natural, is because our entire world, our jobs, our schools, how we travel, our very idea of what a day is, has been built around this artificial, mechanical rhythm for hundreds and hundreds of years. We've just forgotten that it was ever any other way.
And that leaves us with this one last, really powerful thought to chew on. That maybe time isn't some great, unstoppable river that's just flowing past us. Maybe, just maybe, time is not what passes, but what is permitted to pass. One precisely measured, artificial moment at a time.